Welcome back to another episode of Re-Correlated Podcast. I am one of your co-hosts, Natalie Baker, and we have Mac back this week with us. And we also have a very special guest, David Galiata. David, would you like to introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about yourself and your background.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. And hi, everybody. If I don't know you, nice to meet you. I'm David Galiata. And so a little bit about my background. I actually started off with like some of the most humble beginnings possible as a computer technician, basically doing break fix work on hardware. And that helped me land a job at a network operations center where I was a technician for a little over a year and a half. And then I moved into the corporate IT world. And after doing corporate IT, landed in consulting. And so I worked for MSPs, smaller ones, some larger ones, some boutique IT consulting firms. And ultimately, I really liked several aspects of the consulting industry and just how fast paced it is. For example, like in the morning, I'd be working on a firewall and a VPN for a customer. And then later that afternoon, I'd be working on a totally different customer's environment, like on their, like within a Citrix farm. So having to do this day in, day out, and just working with a lot of different people and different environments really helped to build my technical foundation. And it also helped really shape my perspective and my mindset on the importance of continuing education within the field. And all of that experience over the years basically helped me land my current position, which I'm a security architect at Acquia on the SaaS governance team.
Principal security architect, BT Dog. So congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah. So I know that when I first came to Acquia, actually, because I was definitely hired after you. At the first offsite, I think we kind of like really bonded over that MSSP life. So
Yeah. That is true. Yeah, it's everybody has their own journey on how they got into IT, and it's always interesting when you find somebody that has like basically kind of went through the same path and dealt with some of the same struggles, and also had some of the same levels of experience with just the day in, day out sort of grind. It's always good to find that common ground and really bond with people when you find it. So yeah.
And I think that this is going to be an excellent episode because we are talking today about leading with technical knowledge, which I should have introduced before, but whoops, my bad. So we're going to roll with it anyway. Hot take on the topic. David, we'll start with you, then we'll go to Mac, and then I can end with hot takes. Like, what do you want? What is burning in your brain about this topic?
Yeah, it's actually funny. I mean, I'm not really a huge hot take person. Like, I don't know. I'm from California, so I tend to be a little bit more relaxed and chill. But I guess when I was thinking about this, a hot take is that in order to be a good leader in cybersecurity, you have to at least at some point had a role where you got your hands dirty and you had to dive in and really do a deep dive, at least at some level from a technical standpoint. So I don't know. You tell me if that works. If that's a hot take.
I think it's a hot take. I think it's
absolutely fire take. Fire take.
There you go.
So I'm going to go next, and I'm just going to say I think I agree 100%. If you can't do the thing, it's hard to lead the thing. At the same time, something that you do really well, David, is balancing that technical capability with like great people skills, great leadership skills, great communication skills. So I'd love to hear you talk a little bit about how you've pursued technical excellence, but also done the work to make sure that you can lead outside of a technical implementation standpoint too.
Yeah.
Nat, to you.
Yeah, to me. My hot take is don't be a jerk in cyber. That's like the motto of this podcast is don't be a jerk in cyber. And like to be a leader in cyber, you have to lead juniors. So you have to be able to explain the fundamentals behind whatever concept is that you're trying to do, so they actually grasp it and learn it and can retain that information. That's my hot take.
Yeah, no, that's a solid point.
Love it.
I think we could start with let's start with the communication piece of it. David, let's hear from you. How do you handle the communication along with the technical prowess, and kind of balance those two things out?
Yeah. So, like when you're talking about, the strategies for communicating cybersecurity concepts, to somebody like on an executive team, for example, it's it definitely is challenging. And the first thing that comes to mind is being able to translate those complex cybersecurity or technical concepts into business risks, and display or show them how that impacts the overall business. So you want to look at, what are the risks, what are the impacts to the business, and being able to do that translation is really key. And I know that, to an extent, when I say that, it might sound like I'm reading off a CISSP book, right? Like you're talking about business risk and business impact. But I'll give you an example. So I previously worked on a team where we had a couple different tools that would report on security findings, potential misconfigurations within our infrastructure. And our team initially focused on reporting the number of findings and how many tickets were open and closed within a period of time. So we would take those findings, create tickets, and we would report, for example, like over the last 90 days, 100 tickets have been open. I'm just throwing numbers out here, but I'll say 100 tickets have been open. And out of the 100 that were open, 95 of them were closed. And, from our perspective, being the IT technical team, we felt pretty good about this, right? Like we're closing our tickets. We pat ourselves on the back. We're working on these, we're closing out tickets, but what we found is we never really got full buy-in or the attention from the executive team. So we had to take a step back and go back to the drawing board a little bit and figure out why no one was really engaged with our reports or even with our team. And that's because we weren't speaking to what the issues were and how those issues tied in or translated into the business risk and how they impacted the overall business.
You weren't speaking their language.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Because at the end of the day, the executive team, they're trying to run the business. They don't truly
Sure.
want to get into the details on like specific technical issues. And, of course you're going to be closing tickets, right? Like in their mind, right? That's what they're paying you to do. Right. So like it kind of gets into like, how do you actually do that? And one thing that we did is we had to take a closer look at the data and start breaking it down further and start categorizing all of those issues. So like X percentage of them were password related, X percent are data exposure related. And when you start doing that, we actually were able to shift the entire conversation into strictly looking at the numbers to say, hey, our team is closing these tickets out, but these are the types of issues we're seeing, and we are resolving them. But if we didn't have these tools and our team on top of it, we wouldn't even know about the potential data exposure. And that's something that will get their attention and really get them engaged. And then even from there, you can take it a step further and say, okay, well, now that we know we have these issues, maybe we need to do more training and educate the staff to remind them, lock down those publicly shared links or set a password on them, expiration date, all of that to make sure that going forward, we limit the amount of data exposure to the outside world.
Yeah, I think it's a lot about showing your value. Where do you bring value at to an executive? They want to know, what value are you giving me? Because at the end of the day, they're numbers people. That's what they care about. That and pretty pictures. Those are the things they want to see. Pretty pictures and the numbers. And like at the end of the day, that's all they really care about. And you're like, well, I did all these cool things. And they're like, guess what? That does not translate into dollar signs for me. So I can't help you. I don't really care about that. And when you actually are able to say, well, here's how I brought value to your company, that's kind of where you start to set yourself apart from being more junior to being more senior one in that growth path, right?
Right. And value is different for every audience. So, a great part of leadership is being able to figure out, like, who am I speaking to? What do they value? Putting in that work and making sure that if you're talking to a team of technical engineers, value is going to look really different than if you're speaking to leadership or sales. I think one thing that you have done a great job with in your career, David, is helping to transform technical stuff and then create value for that and explain why that should be value, even if maybe it's not just identifying the pre-existing value components for something that you've done technically. It's explaining, hey, this is giving you value. It's not just checking this box that you've already asked us to check. We're anticipating your needs. We're looking for creative solutions, and this is what we're giving you. That's really cool.
Definitely. Yeah.
So how important, now that we've talked a little bit about like executives, communicating with executives, let's kind of take a step back and talk about like the importance of technical proficiency in cybersecurity leadership roles. Because I think we can all agree you have to have some level of knowledge in tech, whether you're doing GRC or you're in a security architect position or you're in a systems engineer, security engineer position. Doesn't really matter. You still have to have some fundamental technical knowledge.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. I think, having a good level of the technical proficiency for folks in leadership roles in cyber or in tech in general is really critical, and it's massive because it allows you and enables you to contribute to projects in a different capacity and properly scope out where the risks are. And you can understand some of the solutions that are being architected. And this is anybody who's worked with me, I probably have used this analogy like probably more than I should, but I like to use the analogy of like all the different puzzle pieces. So like think of like within AWS, right? You have like VPCs, you have subnets, there's NAT gateways, there's storage options, right? So those are all the different puzzle pieces. And if you don't have, or you need at least some level of technical proficiency to be able to understand how all those pieces fit together. But when you get the technical expertise and that knowledge, you understand why those pieces are being put together and why they're being interconnected. Because if you don't, you could give somebody the same puzzle pieces and they can kind of brute force it. And at the end, like the end result might be the same, but along the way, they're going to put the wrong piece in the wrong slot. And then, like I'm sure everybody's done this where you have the puzzle piece and like a little bit of it's kind of broken. You got to snap it back in because you put it in the wrong place to begin with. So, and when you translate that into working with like different teams and stuff, that process, that's when like engineers, architects, project managers, they get frustrated because that's not efficient. Like it's not efficient just to try to, okay, well, let's make a guess here. And we're going to try to put this piece over here, this piece over here. Oh, this one didn't work. But then like at the end result, you still get the same puzzle put together. But along the way, you've created friction. People have tuned out. People are upset. And ultimately, that's not setting yourself up in the proper fashion.
For sure.
Yeah.
Anyone that's read your blog, David, knows that like you're a security architect, but you've actually got a really wide range of interests. So what you're talking about is being able to kind of lead through your technical know-how, but then also recognize when you've got to shore things up. And you're an advocate for continuing education. Talk to us about how you walk that line between being in a leadership position, leading with your skill set, but also identifying areas where you're like, wow, I actually need to upskill on this to make sure you can continue to lead your teams effectively.
Yeah. It's that is a good question, and I kind of go back to some of my early days, like when I first started out. So when I very first started out, I went to it's more of like a vocational school, for a 9-month program, and I did A plus, Network plus, and I got some Microsoft certs, as well.
Nice.
And so, like, right away, I kind of noticed that that the program that I was in was kind of trying to be as well rounded as possible. And even at the time, I just kind of maybe briefly thought of that and was aware of it. But as I progressed in my career, and as I got, especially like when I got into consulting, that's where a lot of, like I said, in my like kind of background, when I got into consulting, it really kind of shaped and gave me a different perspective on the continuing education aspect, because no two networks, no two companies really operate the exact same. Like, even if they both have Cisco switches, Cisco routers, Cisco firewalls, there's going to be little differences here and there that are just unique to that business. And so, like I said, and then as I move forward, I gained more of an understanding on how to be as well balanced as possible. So I always, have that, in the back of my mind, where, I'm going to try to identify certain key things that I just have to know. And sort of, in a lot of ways, what I'm really getting at, is building that technical foundation, where you have a solid foundation and you're well-rounded to a certain level. And then from there, you can find certain things that you might be interested more, or there are certain things that you're more interested in, and you can sort of do a deep dive on those things. But you'd still got to keep yourself somewhat grounded and be well-rounded in a number of things, before you can go specialize in something. So that's kind of like always been in the back of my mind, and something that I try to strive to actually do and accomplish. And I kind of forget the second part of the question.
No, that was a perfect answer. It was like, how do you balance like having that really strong technical skill and then making sure that it's broad enough? Natalie, you're kind of in a similar situation where you started in this like compliance legal background and then have branched out into all different areas. I feel like your journey is kind of similar as well.
Yeah, I have a really weird background, because I started off in legal and then they were like, we think you should do IT. And I was like, yes, if I must. Probably not the best idea, but okay, I guess. And then I kind of just got thrown into that, and I kind of just was like, oh, you know what? I'm actually pretty good at this. I think I'm going to continue on doing this. And I went back to school. And so, yeah, I do kind of like feel that I've kind of bored of that. And I kind of really relate when David said, like, once he got into consulting, it became more prevalent that like continuing education became more important, because now you are the expert. You're the expert that other people are hiring in, and you have to know what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
So especially in this world where things change so fast.
Yeah. Oh, exactly. And that's the hardest part, is staying on top of things, because even by the time, and I had Brandon Keith on a couple episodes ago, and he was talking to me, and he said, with how curriculums go through their accreditation process, by the time you're getting a curriculum in your classroom, like, it's already obsolete. It's already like, this is old technology now. I'm working on way newer things at work. So it's tough. I think there's a lot that has to change with the accreditation processes especially for cyber education.
For sure.
All right. So let's talk about building and nurturing high-performing teams in cyber, because David and I do this a lot.
A lot. I was going to say, I've had the privilege to work on both of your teams in the past, and it's something that you both do really well in really different ways. Yeah. So I'd love to hear about how you guys approach that as technical SMEs, but also people that know that, hey, if I'm the only person on this team that can do the thing, we're not going to be an effective team.
Well, actually, Mac, I'd like to hear your perspective first.
Okay. Yeah, so I mean, like, as someone that has come in and didn't necessarily, when I joined either of your teams, have the kind of technical know-how that anywhere approaching either of you, I think something that I really appreciate about being a junior member of a team that's actively upskilling into that vertical to make sure that they can contribute from a technical standpoint is that really good structured leadership, like making sure that we're giving junior people a clear path to contribution, but also giving them space to contribute in their own way while they're getting to that kind of upper level of contribution. I talk a lot about breaking into cyber and finding ways to contribute value early in your cyber career. And that is kind of incumbent upon the person breaking in, but it's also incumbent upon the leaders that are guiding them through that process. So I feel really lucky that both of you were great about offering guidance, offering constructive criticism, but also creating space for me to contribute, whether it was in SaaS governance through compliance and architecture, if it was in compliance frameworks through FedRAMP proposals, like having that sandbox to play in, not the testing sandbox, but the little kid sandbox, to like learn these tools and use them and build a confidence to be able to contribute is so critical. And it's not something that you always see from people that have technical know-how. I think what you run into a lot as a junior cyber person is, you know what, this is going to take you too long. I'm just going to do it for you. That doesn't help me learn and grow. Right. So creating the space, defending that space for your junior folks to contribute is going to turn them in to major contributors way faster. And it's something you guys do really well.
Yeah.
All right.
So thanks.
David, back to you.
It's interesting because like I think one of the most underrated things that I don't think is talked enough about when you're talking about building teams, and even just like whether you're building a team, you're joining a team, you're working in a team environment in a leadership role, one of the most underrated things is just actually like observing and listening, because I feel like too often, especially people that are in a leadership role that join a team, want to come in and immediately like put their stamp on things, or like within like a day or two after one small incident or occurrence, they're gonna want to make changes to this, that, and the other. And again, it's like, no, let's actually take a step back. Let's observe how the team operates. We're gonna listen to what they're saying, listen to some conversations that are happening, and really try to gain an understanding of the day in, day out operations, and just figure out the actual inner workings of the team before you go and implement any changes. And then the other thing that Mac was touching on, I definitely agree with, because that's another key element when you're building out teams or even working in them, but especially if you're in a leadership role, is creating a safe environment that promotes collaboration and is open, where people feel comfortable to ask questions. Because like, I know when I was a junior, I worked in environments where, I was like, just a simple network operations center technician, and I was like scared to death to walk across over in our cube farm. Like I like to go talk to the sysadmins. Like I would like triple check, quadruple check every single thing before I went over there to go tell them that there was an outage or something was down, because I knew that as soon as I walked over there, it was like I felt like I was being cross-examined by the county district attorney. Like it was just a question, boom, boom, boom. And when you're like, in that situation, when like I was like just starting out, I was intimidated, right? I mean, these people had so much more knowledge and experience and everything, and I didn't want to feel like I missed something or that they thought I was lazy. And so just creating that environment that again, like you want to promote collaboration, have things open where people can ask questions. And, that doesn't mean that like, it's all just unicorns and rainbows and like, oh, everything's so great. Like call me on a Friday night when I'm bowling at 7 p.m. About a question you have about this like Linux command, right? That doesn't mean that, but it's just like, again, it kind of gets back to what Natalie was saying, like, just don't be a jerk. Like, let's all understand that we're here, we're all a part of the same team. Like, if that system is down and it's down for a length of time, like, whether you're junior or a senior or on what team, like, we're all going to fail. Like, right. It's all on us. And so by you doing that, like, that's not a high performing environment, right? Like, you're talking about like building a high performing team. In that kind of environment, everything gets delayed because, going back to the example, you're looking at something, there's a system that's down, you're going back to check, you're troubleshooting it again and again and again. And the whole time that system is still down, and it just delays the whole process to get it back up and running.
Yeah, I think one of my favorite ways of creating that safe space for somebody who's junior, because this was never done for me. And as the person who is now in a leadership position, I was like, I want to be better than what I previously experienced. Right. And so when I was early on in a leadership position, when I ran SOC before, I had this one girl on my team, and I would hate getting on training calls with her because she would ask why for everything. And I loved it. I loved that she questioned everything, but I didn't really understand what she was looking for sometimes, because I was just like, she'd be like, why? I'd be like, because I said so. I mean, does that not work? But then, so I had to take a step back as a leader and say, okay, look at yourself and think about who you are and be a little bit self-aware of yourself and do an assessment here and be fair about it. And what it came down to was I was afraid to share my screen with her to show her that I was Googling things. So I would try to Google as fast as I could to find the answers. But that wasn't helping her. It wasn't helping me. It was just making the situation more stressful. So what I started to do then was I would change it and I'd show her. I'd be like, oh, yeah, no, we're going to go Google this now. So that she knew, hey, it's okay to utilize those resources. I don't have to know everything. I have a manager here who is literally Googling with me because she doesn't know all the answers. Like, it doesn't matter who you are, you're never going to know all the answers. So to create that safe space now, that is something that I've continued to implement and just continue to do, is to sit on, if I don't know the answer, I don't know off the top of my head, let's Google it. Let's look it up. And then it also teaches your junior members how to better utilize Google as a search engine and how to put in the correct terms to get the right results that they're looking for, right?
Effective speed Googling is definitely a skill set that I was not prepared for. I was like, everyone just, and that's the thing, like you're explaining exactly what I can remember feeling so clearly. Like, you get into a team, you get into a conversation, God forbid, a one-on-one conversation with someone you know is technical. As that junior person, it's like, oh my gosh, they know everything. They know every single control in NIS 853. I know they know it. And I'm over here just like doing this, and that cat in the meme, and it's terrifying. And so I love, Natalie, what you're saying. And David, you're kind of echoing the same mindset of like, it's cool. You can look. We all have imposter syndrome. None of us know everything. It's normalizing the fact that, hey, I'm going to go sanity check myself. I'm going to go make sure, I'm going to go consult this documentation. I'm going to go make sure, or hey, I'm going to Slack somebody else that knows this particular thing that much better. Normalizing that and embracing that. The best technical leaders I've ever worked with, got two on the call, are not afraid to be like, yeah, I'm not totally sure. Let me get the answer. And it's hard to get to a space of comfort feeling that. So what do you do when someone screws up though? Like you guys are the ones that can do the things the best as you're managing teams of people who are probably going to be less technically savvy. How do you handle the tough conversations?
Yeah, that is a good question. That is a good question. Yeah, no, it's certainly challenging. But like, so my approach to that is, trying to get to the point where we limit the damage, or we limit the amount or the potential points of failure along the way. Right. So I think that's kind of like my approach. Like when you say, how do you handle that? It's more like, let's get ahead of it to where that person, like, I'm not just going to say like, okay, you just got the CCNA certification, so you know what a router is, you know what a default route is, you know what a route table is? Okay, great. Here's a router. Go implement this at this customer site and like completely redesign their whole network infrastructure. Like,
oh, and by the way, we want you to implement BGP.
right. Like that's probably not going to work. So, you know, like there's some shadowing and there's other steps that you can take when you're in that leadership role to avoid that. But you know, like specifically when even at the end of the day, if we do that and there's still some issues that happen, or you know there is an outage, or there's you know or some level of incident, you know, I think after, like, you know, certainly take care of it right then and there, but then afterward just having a follow-up conversation. And it kind of touches on what Natalie was talking about, where it's like just being human, and also like, you know, you want to have that discussion and let them know, like, let's use this as a learning experience. I mean, I've brought down networks before. I mean, it's like, I mean, it's kind of funny in a way. Like, I never thought about it at the time, but like now looking back, I'm like, it's kind of a rite of passage. Like, it's almost a rite of passage. Like, when you're a network engineer at some level, you brought down a network. Like, I don't want to hear, you know, anything about, oh no, well, I was so careful and had planned out. No, at some point or another, like, you hit enter. It's like, there's like this feeling when you're in a Cisco configuration and you're on like configuring whatever interface, and you hit enter and the terminal just kind of like
blank
shuts off, and you hit enter and you've lost connection. So, you know, everyone's done it, you know, again, like, that's not, you know, you don't want to sugarcoat things or just like totally, you know, gloss over the fact that this person made a mistake, or, you know, you don't want to avoid some level of, you know, like responsibility. However, at the same time, just make sure that you're at least being sort of human about it, and chalk it up as a learning experience, because 9 times out of 10, you've probably made that mistake or something similar when you are in that same position.
But I love the idea of, like, as that leader, keeping the blast radius for those things really small, so you're protecting your team. You know, you're using your technical skills to say, like, all right, I can see how, you know, I know you're gonna screw this up at some point, which is good. It means you're learning, but we're gonna keep that attack surface, risk surface really, really low for you. So yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. And I mean, luckily nowadays, you know, there's so many, like with cloud technologies and all these virtual learning environments and like virtualized network stuff. I mean, you can lab stuff out to the point now where, like, you know, when I was first starting out in like 2006, there really wasn't a ton of that. Like, you were kind of forced to maybe go on like eBay and buy physical hardware for like your little lab. Now you can spin up things. So it's even, you know, now you can limit that blast radius even further, and go over things that maybe you couldn't have, you know, in the past.
Yeah, I'll never forget having to like just run commands on my machine to figure out how PowerShell worked on my like local machine, and being like, I don't know, is this gonna work? We're pushing straight to production too, because we were going rogue. Like, hopefully this goes okay. Everybody else, my thing as the junior at that point, I was like, are you sure we can push to production? They're like, well, how well did you write this automation? And I was like, I mean, I tested on my laptop, man, but that's not the production system here. Like, I don't know. And they're like, we'll try it. And I was like, okay, well, what happens if it fails? And they're like, it fails. It's fine. It's fine.
It's not a bug. It's a feature. It's fine.
Yeah.
We'll fix it in prod.
But then we would roll it out on like a Friday. That's the worst, is like when it says admin's like, we're just going to roll this to prod on Friday afternoon. You're like, why? Why are we still doing this? But yeah, I agree. Creating a safe space so that people, especially junior members of your team, have the space to make mistakes without them being client facing has always been my thing, right? Like, a junior can make a mistake, and 9 times out of 10, that mistake will never be seen by a client because I'm catching it first. And usually it's in like, you know, vulnerability reports or looking over, you know, policy procedure documents and stuff like that. I will try to catch those mistakes and especially when I was in SOC, because I would start all my junior people out doing vulnerability management and stuff like that. So they kind of got their feet wet with that, and then they would move up. So by the time they were actually like eyes on glass monitoring the SIM, SEAM, that's what I call it, SEAM.
Yeah, I call
they
it
would. Okay, we are seamers because that's how it's spelled. Thank you. They would already have that technical know-how built up. So it just created that safe environment for them to learn. But at the same time, their mistakes were never being seen client facing. It was only on the back end. And then we could have a discussion about it before it ever went out, before it ever blew up into a problem. And then, at the end of the day, if a mistake is seen by a client, as a leader, it's just your job to kind of fall on that sword client facing and on the back end retrain.
Oof. No one likes to fall on the sword, but I do. I mean, that's the job of the leader, right?
Paid to do.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We've talked a little bit about how you guys address kind of the soft side of leadership, bringing it back to technical. When we're looking at projects that are actively trying to evolve, some of us work on projects where like just trying to do the thing and keep the thing the same. Both of you work on projects where you're trying to grow, you're trying to push into new territory. How have you allowed your technical experience, your technical know-how to inform strategy as you're looking at like, what's the next iteration? I've nurtured and matured this team. Now we're ready to push the envelope. How is your technical expertise informed that process for you? David.
Go ahead, David.
I was just gonna say, I was just gonna say, I kind of touched on a little bit earlier, like with the analogy for like those puzzle pieces where, if you understand the technical side, it really enables you to understand how those pieces are going to be put together, and then how, from a business standpoint, where you can strategically align yourself to the goals of the project. So like, for example, like there could be situations where you come up with a project plan and and so some of it really just comes down to like having the level of experience. At least, I feel that way. Because like, for example, I've been in projects where like a project manager creates a project plan and they say, like this infrastructure upgrade is going to take an hour and a half. And just based on your technical skills and your knowledge that there's no way that that's going to take an hour and a half. But then you have to go find and understand what the goals of the project are and where some of the constraints are from the business side. And then, but having that level of technical expertise allows you to really take that kind of step back and really understand everything as a whole. And then you can maybe move things around in a strategic manner where like, okay, we actually, based on the metrics that we found from the last reporting period, we actually don't need this much RAM in the server. So let's scale that back a little bit. And there might be some other pieces that you can find and strategically place and mix and match to give yourself, instead of an hour and a half, now you've given yourself 4 hours, because that's realistically what it's going to take. And it's, like I said, it kind of gets back to just having that level of technical knowledge and your experience. And there's always going to be some level of a constraint within a project or an environment. And being able to navigate that really comes down to, again, being able to balance that technical expertise and the knowledge and understanding what the business goals are. It's kind of funny. It's something that I always say too, is that, real world doesn't always equal perfect world, because in the real world, you're never given a perfect world scenario. And I was just talking about like labs, like when you lab something, sure, that's a perfect world scenario. When you actually go to implement it, there's always going to be some level of a constraint, whether it's budget or resources, even personality types. And so navigating all of those things, it is quite challenging. But I think when you have the technical knowledge and you marry that with understanding the business goals, it allows you to again, strategically look at the project or the plan and fully get that implemented in the best fashion possible.
I'm feeling like it's that scene in every movie where like the young hotshot is in the plane with the other person. They're like, how many times you flown this thing? And they're like, 500 in a simulator. And there's always that moment where they're like, oh my gosh, you know, it's the difference between being a seasoned vet and being someone that might know some idea of how to do the thing, but hasn't really done it. Sorry, Nat, I jumped on you. Go ahead.
Right.
No, absolutely. That's exactly what it's like too, right? Like, oh no, we're all going to die in this plane.
We're all going to die. Yeah.
I've been on those flights, man. It is not a fun flight.
Mm-hmm.
You're like, am I dying today? Am I gonna die today? I forget where I was going with it. Crap. We're gonna come back to it. I'll think of it later. Anyway, let's keep moving along. So balancing your technical depth of knowledge with leadership responsibilities. How do you find that balance there, David?
Yeah, you know, that was another interesting question that I saw here. I'm actually it's when I was thinking about it and even thinking about it now, I'm actually kind of bad at this because like I go super hardcore technical for like certifications and just knowledge, and I want to be, you know, very technical. That's just like by my very nature. Like I said, being in that consulting kind of role for so long, it's like you were saying, Natalie, like you're kind of like you're the expert for like everything. You have to be the expert for everything. You're responsible for the entire infrastructure, for all the supports, all the alerts, monitoring, right? So being able to speak to executives and potential clients and customers, you have to be technical. And so by my very nature, I want to be a technical, you know, engineer, architect type. Again, like it's kind of funny, like when I like as I'm thinking about this, I'm actually kind of bad because I go through phases where I do deep dives and I go super technical, but then at the same time, I go through other phases where I'm not doing that and I do balance things out. And like, fortunately, my kids do like competitive sports. And so there's a lot of travel outside of, you know, just on the weekends. So we're traveling a lot. We're doing a lot of like mini road trips, as I like to call them. And so where, you know, I can't really bring my laptop. I mean, I have my phone obviously, but like it's kind of funny, like total side note, but like it kind of drives me crazy. My wife does everything on her phone. She will like, it's like I said, like she has to fill out a form or do anything. It's on her phone. And I'm like, why don't you just use your laptop? Like the laptop's easier. And I'm the opposite. I don't want to do anything like actual like PDFs or anything like that on my phone. So in that regard, like it's kind of nice because I get to get away. I get to spend time with the family on my little mini road trips and watching them play. And like, I just have my phone, so I don't always bring my laptop. And so I think that in the grand scheme of things, like I end up balancing things out. But you know, that's really what you have to do, right? You have to find what's your balance, how, and you know, how I do it for the most part is like on the technical side, it's like 95 or even 99%. It's planning. Like
Sure.
I actually I do some like bullet journaling in the morning. I know I've actually written about it on the Acme blog and whatnot. But I used to actually be a little bit more into that and like go a little bit more in depth with that and try to find like apps, you know, on my phone or on my computer, like Todoist and Notion, and make all these checklists. And I've actually found like, you know, in order to really be productive, I just have to calendar everything. So it's like 95% is just planning, getting everything on the calendar, not messing with other outside tools, and all of that. And then the other side is, spending time with the family and really getting away. Like, so I always encourage people, like, if you want to really truly balance things out, you have to get away from your comfortable environment, like where you can bring your laptop and you have your laptop with you, and it's just so easy to, oh no, I'm just going to do this for 5 minutes. I'm going to check Slack, check my email, and then before you know it, it's like an hour later and you're just kind of still doing your work stuff. So that's at least how I balance things out.
So I take a pretty different approach to it, but I think your approach is great too, because I think that's where I fail at, is I don't do as much stepping away from work when I'm supposed to. Like, I will just work 16-hour days and think nothing of it, which is not healthy to do long term. That's how you put yourself out. Don't do that.
Don't do that. Don't do that.
Don't do it. It's terrible. It's so funny because I yell at everybody else about having work-life balance, and then people are like, Natalie, what about that work-life balance? And I'm like, okay, well, that's not here.
Do as I say, not as I do, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So how I try to balance my technical knowledge with my leadership responsibilities is I've looked at it at a point of, it's no longer my responsibility to be the lead tech person on a call, right? My responsibility is to train my people to be the lead tech people on the call. So to impart all the knowledge that I have and make them absorb it over time. So that's really my goal, is because like I get a lot of junior teams. I love training entry-level talent. I'm just really good at it. So I have a lot of junior people on my teams. And so to do that, like, instead of me being the point person all the time, I might start taking a step aside and saying, hey, Mac, what do you think about this? Or, hey, so-and-so, what do you think about this? Hey, what are your thoughts on this? And making them start to have a technical opinion. Mac, you didn't even realize that when you first started having a technical opinion until I remember, like, because I remember training you, you were like, I'm not a technical person. I'm not going to be a technical person. And now you're sitting in a very technical role, aren't you?
I am.
Yeah,
I am, and actively trying to be more technical every day. But it sneaks up on you. I mean, I love what you're saying, Natalie, about like training the next subject matter expert on your team. And David, that actually comes into like your work-life balance piece too. If we were like, the industry loves to like take pot shots at like the non-technical ISOs out there and like the non-technical leaders. At the same time, like, leadership is hard. Like, it requires the balance. It requires taking a step back from being that person that's going to do the thing probably better and faster than the folks that you're bringing up quickly. For folks that might watch this, that are this me, they're the top of the technical ladder on their team or on their project, but they feel that desire to like want to lead, maybe not in a like stepping fully away from technical implementation mode, but bringing some of that in. Like, how do you start? How do you start the process of, I've been the keys on the fingers on the keys for a long time, and I want to take the next step. You both have taken different paths. You both have different approaches. Like, what does that look like starting that journey towards technical leadership?
Yeah. I mean, I'd say, just first and foremost, just opening up the lines of communication and being aware, you as the technical expert, having an awareness and opening up communication with the junior staff and making yourself available is really how it starts. Because if you're not approachable, if you're just the type that's like, hey, like, I just do my thing, like, I just code, I just do my thing, and you do your thing and leave me alone, like, that's not really going to work. And then like, if you're doing that, it's really hard. You can't turn around and say, oh, well, now I want to be a leader. It's like, well,
Right.
Like, but you never talk to anybody. You just kind of go in the basement on your computer and plug away and configure things. And so I would say that, yeah, like, opening up lines of communication, being approachable, and getting to know some of the junior staff. I mean, maybe it's as simple of, or simple as getting to know them and what they're kind of interested in, like from a tech, and maybe it's not even from a technology standpoint. Maybe it's, what are they interested in outside of work? Do you have common interests? I mean, I know Natalie and I kind of hit it off because we had a similar background, like with the MSP stuff. So, there's always opportunities where you can get to know somebody. And again, at least from my perspective, I try to always be approachable, always open up communication, and create that sort of environment where people can ask me questions and know that I'm gonna give them the best answer that I can. I think that's where it really starts, because because like I said, if you're not approachable and you don't communicate well, you're probably not going to be a good leader. But and then really quick, not to circle back, I'll let Natalie answer, but I wanted to get your perspective on the last kind of topic we were talking about, Mac, because like I'm curious from your perspective as somebody who got into the field, how are you balancing out, becoming more technical? And do you have like a feeling where like you are just constantly in go mode trying to catch up? And I'm curious your thoughts on that part, but I'll let Natalie answer the other part.
No, let Mac go. Mac, you go.
I'll go. I'll jump in because it is tough.
Yeah, no, and I only bring that up because that's something, and again, I don't want to circle back too much, but like it's something that's kind of interesting to me, because even as somebody who has experience, like I always feel like I need to catch up and that I need to keep going and I need to learn more. And then I'm just curious your thoughts, because, somebody new coming in, especially now, like with social media is a lot more prevalent nowadays, and everything, like versus like when I started. And so just kind of curious your thoughts on how you balance that out and what your sort of mentality is like in that regard.
Yeah, I mean, I was sitting here when you were both talking about like the continuing education piece and learning and growing and going through your process, like, having just started this process in the last couple of years. I think in general, continuing education in cybersecurity can kind of feel like a Sisyphean task, like you're pushing the boulder up the hill, but you're never going to get to the top, which is great, because that means that you can have something that we talk a lot about at Acquia is having 1 year of experience repeated 10 times versus 10 years of experience where you're growing and iterating and learning new things. So I love the idea that cyber changes so quickly, because I can dig into zero trust, or I can dig into this new thing, this new tech, and no one's been studying it for 15 years. So it's the playing field's a little bit more level. Balance is hard. I think, especially breaking into this industry, you have to really overcome a lot of really tough inertia to get a foot in the door. And then you get into conversations with folks like the two of you, and it's like, I mean, Natalie, you talked about speed Googling, but like even just learning how to speed Google stuff. So I think that there's like a requisite amount of being in hyperdrive, especially early in your career, that is deadly. And Natalie, you talked a little bit about your 16-hour work days and burnout, and you do that, but you also know how to unplug. It is hard to get out of that like newcomer mindset, and you have to do it pretty quick, or you will, like, there's so much knowledge and there's so much work to be done that if you don't start putting up those guardrails really early, it's deadly. I know, like when I started, I was part-time, I was working full-time, maybe more than full-time, just trying to upskill. Like I'm studying for Sec Plus and also trying to learn the NIST controls, and also, trying to do these side projects so that I'm bringing value to the team. And that is like not sustainable. I'm married, I've got a mortgage, I've got other things that I need to be able to do that are facilitated by having a job that I like and that pays well and that I'm successful in. But if I'm dying at my keyboard, I'm not going to enjoy any of those things. So something that I talk to even newer newcomers than me, which, it's a small group, but something I talk to a lot about is like, all right, cool, do the work, like get your boot in the door, but then you've got to almost immediately start figuring out how to make this sustainable, because as you both said, like the continuing education, the constant upskilling, the constant kind of exploration into new areas with your skill set as that skill set grows is what makes a healthy career in this industry. And if you don't put those barriers up, like David, if you don't just take the cell phone to the kids' soccer game, or you don't take the time, it's not sustainable. And I learned that the hard way in my last career, which is why I'm in this career. And so I wasn't going to repeat those mistakes of being 100% about the job all the time, even though you have to do that in like little, if I'm trying to learn about Kubernetes, like it's going to be a long couple of weeks of me being like, what's a pod? Like a pod of whales, like a collection of whales. That's cute. No, that's not Kubernetes. Or, like I'm trying to learn Python right now. And Python's hard. Python is hard. And it's supposed to be the easy one. Like that's really tough. So that takes a little bit outside of the normal range. But I know now that can be a short burst of increased time to learn something, and that's going to level set. So, but thank you for the question.
Yeah, no, it's really great. And that's something that you've done really well is like set your goals to where there are like reasonable, and you are like really focused, and like you said, you kind of understand how to do the balance, right? Where like, you understand for like a couple of weeks, things might get kind of crazy, but then after you get past a couple of weeks and you build that knowledge up, and you have it, then it's like, okay, then it kind of goes down and balances out. And now you're just kind of cruising, right? So it's like, so no, that's super awesome. And I think it's really valuable for people to understand, and that's something that I, like when I first started out, I kind of struggled with that. And, it's like, I first started and it was like, you know what? No, I'm going to be like a CCIE, and I'm going to be like a Linux complete master guru. And I just wanted to go like straight to the top. And then it was like, wait, I can't even find a help desk job. Like, what's going on? So no, that's really, really great.
And another place where that great technical leadership comes into place is helping people upskill, but also creating that balance for your teams early. I had some great leaders early on in my career, and that has made the biggest difference in saying like, why are you still on Slack? Like get off Slack. Like we did this last week. This is done. Like this doesn't need to be an everyday thing. And that was huge because I kind of felt like it needed to be an everyday thing. Anchoring value in people and their ability to like healthily, mentally, physically, spiritually contribute to something is a big deal.
I think
that's got a couple minutes. You want to jump in?
Yeah, I think that's a lot of what leadership, like that's the perfect way to wrap it up. Honestly, that's a lot of what leadership is just being a realistic human being and being like, I know you still have a life outside of this. I want you to be awesome at your job. But at the end of the day, you need to shut your computer off and go away. Because at a certain point, you have to tell your juniors, please go away. I need to go to sleep. And if you're still online, I feel like I have to be online. But at the same time, as a leader, you have to make sure that you're stepping away, because if your juniors see you online all the time, they're just going to think like, oh, I have to work all the time. I don't ever get any time off. Like I'm working 24/7, 365 because she's working 24/7, 365. And as a leader, that's your job to look at yourself with a little bit of self-awareness there and say, hey, how is my actions being a disservice to my team by setting the wrong example? And that is it's a hard lesson to learn, but once you learn it, you get good at learning that balance and being able to say, no, see, you see me online from these hours for a couple weeks, but then every day for the next month, I'm off at 4:00 or I'm off at 5:00 and I'm not hopping back in. Unless there's
learning that balance.
There's an absolute emergency. So but it's even more important as a leader to have that balance and to have learned that balance because your juniors look up to you.
Learning the balance and teaching the balance is a big deal.
Yeah.
Yep.
So we are closing up this episode. It's been a wonderful episode. I think it's been a really, really fun one for us to have. What are your final thoughts? David, you go first.
Yeah. So yeah. First, thank you again for having me on the podcast. I appreciate it. And yeah, my final thoughts are just looking forward. I know that like cybersecurity, there's a lot of challenges. With AI coming up and more incidents happening every day. It seems like, but if you're in a leadership role, just continue to lead by example. Again, create those safe environments for everybody. And if you're not in a leadership role and you're looking to do that, just continue to be curious, learn as much as you can, try to grow, and and ask the right questions, and continue to push forward.
Mac.
Lots of technical folks out there. Everyone can be, or lots of people can be SMEs. Not many people can be leaders. Refine those soft skills, be open for communication, and put yourself out there. And be sure to practice what you preach.
Yeah, my final thoughts are, again, just don't be a jerk to your juniors. Everybody has been there. Everybody has been that junior. Be the leader that you wish you had when you were the junior. That's my final thoughts for the episode. David, thank you so much for joining us. Has been a fun episode. We will see everybody back here in about 2 weeks for the next episode, which is going to be so much fun, especially for us legal people, because we will be talking about the $1 million MSSP lawsuit that has been filed in California.
Oh my goodness.
I'm excited for this one. There's a couple of us that are definitely cybersecurity, but we came from a legal background that will be on this episode, so it will be a fun one. Hope to see everybody back here in a couple of weeks. And thanks again, David, for joining us. And we will chat at you all later.
Bye.